This is Bob Oliphant from the Westford Historical Society and Museum, bringing you episode 52 of season 3 of the Westford Wardsman podcast. The Westford Wardsman newspaper was part of Turner's Public Spirit, a weekly newspaper in Ayer a century ago. In this episode, we'll be reading the Wardsman for the week ending Saturday, December 24th, 1910, and I'll elaborate on what was happening in Westford that week. This week's Wardsman starts with the About Town section. This was always written by Samuel L. Taylor of Westford. The Fortnightly Club, which has been slumbering and listening for some effective and affective voice to call it forth to old-time gathering of forces to do something, has heard the Christmas call, "Come forth," possibly a reference to Isaiah 34:1. Cheer up the children, and all else humanity will catch on. With this in view, the management of the Fortnightly Club will have a Christmas entertainment at the Wright Schoolhouse on Saturday evening, December 24th. There will be songs, speeches, trees, readings, presents, something for everybody from the cradle onward to old age and all midway ages. Mr. and Mr. Charles and baby Decatur left California last Monday for Westford and Groton. Mr. Decatur will be remembered as one of the younger generation of scholars of the Stony Brook School and oldest son of John H. Decatur on the Lowell Road. He has been in California several years with financial success. Mrs. Decatur will be remembered in Groton as Miss Rose Adams, daughter of Henry Adams. Mr. and Mrs. Frank Dupee of Lowell have added a baby carriage to household essentials. It has not yet been assigned a name. Mr. Dupee will be remembered by Westford people as a native of the town where once stood the largest elm in Middlesex County. When the fire of September 15th, 1900, sheared it of its beauty and life and made ashes for the cornfield of the farm buildings, the old Dupee farm homestead at Westford Depot. The main building, the house is still there on Carlisle Road at Acton Road, just across Acton Road towards the Carlisle line. Vigorous as ever for the welfare of village, church, and social life of the community, Mrs. Herbert E. Fletcher, the Oak Hill branch, gave a concert and entertainment with her Sunday school class at Marshall's Hall on Thursday evening of last week. The listeners were not a crowd, but those who did listened to edification. Several dollars were saved from being wrecked by cheap users. They will be devoted to uses along the lines of, quote, "hitch your wagon to a star," end quote. That quote was used by Ralph Waldo Emerson in his essay American Civilization, which appeared in the Atlantic Monthly in 1862. Miss Flora Palmer and Dr. Samuel L. Jocelyn were married at Reno, Nevada, December 3rd. They will live at Fernley, Nevada. Both are well known to the villagers of Westford, the bride as a native of the town with home at Graniteville, and the groom as a successful physician with office at Graniteville for several years. Thomas H. Murray, living on the Concord Road, is seriously ill with the complication of troubles, with dropsy predominating. As section foreman on the Nashua and Acton Railroad, he was unable to work since November 1st. His illness has been nearly 2 years, gaining a hold that keeps what it gains. The Sunday School and Friends of the Unitarian Society will observe the gift side of Christmas with its social come-together in the vestry of the church on Saturday evening, December 24th at 7 o'clock. The children will get a present, so plan to be present. Alexander F. Courtney on the Keyes Road on Francis Hill is critically ill. It is the reappearance of an old trouble caused several years ago by an accident while working in the Brookside Mill. 2 of the children of Carl Strandberg on the Lowell Road at Brookside are ill with pneumonia. H.E. Fletcher and Company, stone contractors and general furnishers of stone hardware, are still at it with 200 men, and zero frost is driven from his lurking in the stone by steam pressure. This gives the stone summer pliability. Miss Belle Walker recently entertained old-time Stony Brook schoolmates and neighbors and made the evening with its edible sweets more impressive as friendship than any rod of correction applied in the disciplined days of the Little Red Schoolhouse. The little baby of Mr. and Mrs. Edmund B. Whitney at Brookside is ill with the winter's chill. Mrs. C.R.P. Decatur and Edward are home from the Maritime provinces, whither they have been visiting relatives and snowstorms. They lived at the Pelatiah Fletcher House on Lowell Road. The next section is the Forge Village section. A very interesting concert was given on Saturday evening by the members of the RTS. I believe that's the Religious Tract Society. The RTS Club in their rooms, and was very much enjoyed by all who had the pleasure of being present. The program included songs and recitations by the different members and also by their invited guests, the principals taking part being Joseph Bennett, Thomas Jacqueline, Robert Orr, and Charles Flanagan. The concert closed with the singing of the club song, composed by one of the members. The Tigers of this village, mainly composed of RTS club men, have formed a hockey team and expect to have a game on next Saturday. They are in a fine condition and ready to meet any of the surrounding teams. The many friends of Dola Dumont will be pained to hear of the injury which he received while skating last Saturday. A large party were enjoying the sport on Sandy Pond in Ayer when Mr. Dumont tripped and fell, sustaining a very painful injury to his shoulder. He was attended by Dr. Sherman of Graniteville. Hermidas Chamberlain sustained a very bad sprain of his foot last week Friday while at work in the mill of the Abbott Worsted Company. A basket of wool weighing 450 pounds fell on it, and Mr. Chamberlain is still confined to his home. Mrs. Lucretia Reed has been confined to her home for about 2 weeks, suffering from an attack of the grip. She is cared for by her sister, Mrs. Mary I. Drake. Mrs. William Burnett is recovering slowly from a severe attack of the grip. The Self-Help Lodge of Oddfellows held its semi-annual business meeting in Abbott Hall on Monday evening. Officers were duly elected. The annual Christmas tree of St. Andrew's Mission was held on Monday evening and was attended by a large number of people. The program was comprised of 28 numbers and was unusually good, the children speaking and playing better than they ever have before on such an occasion. They certainly did credit to their teachers. It was said by one listener, not one child made a single mistake. After the program was completed, Santa Claus distributed the gifts from the tree to all the children, many receiving as much as their little hands could hold. Among those who attended this most enjoyable affair were many from Groton, Ayer, Graniteville, as well as a large number of friends and relatives of the little tots in this village. The next section is called Christmas Exercises. The children of Cameron School held their annual Christmas exercises at the school on Friday afternoon, which was largely attended by relatives and friends. Each grade gave a very interesting program, including readings and singing of Christmas music. In the 2 lower grades, the principal features were the well-laden Christmas tree, and every child was remembered by a gift. In the 2 grammar grades, the singing and readings were splendid. 2- and 3-part songs were rendered in first-class shape. In the principal's room, the special number was a one-act sketch by the young ladies, which showed careful training on the part of the teachers, as well as careful study on the part of the pupils. The piano solo by Mrs. Edith Spencer was very much enjoyed by the audience. The teachers of the school are certainly to be congratulated on the excellent work given by the pupils. The next section is Graniteville. At the short business meeting held by the Holy Name Society in St. Catherine's Church after Mass last Sunday, it was voted that this society would attend in a body the big Mass meeting of the Holy Name Societies that will be held in St. Patrick's Church in Lowell on the third Sunday in January. The choir members of St. Catherine's Church are now busy rehearsing special music to be sung in the church on Christmas Day. The members of St. Catherine's Temperance Society held an interesting meeting in their rooms on Monday night. Considerable business of importance was transacted, and the Committee on Entertainments reported much progress. It is the intention of the committee to hold an entertainment and supper, followed by dancing sometime during the latter part of January. This affair will be held in this village. The engagement of Charles Pope of North Chelmsford and Miss Angela Brissom of this village has been announced. The Sergeant School closed here on last Friday for a vacation of 2 weeks. There was a very interesting entertainment of songs and recitations by the children of the 4 rooms. Mr. and Mrs. Isaac Hall are rejoicing over a baby boy, Richard W. Hall, which was born last Wednesday, December 15th. And he has several descendants in town to this day. The next paragraph is called Came Near Freezing. Edda Damaris of this town, aged 6 years, narrowly escaped freezing to death on Friday morning of last week. The young girl attends school at North Chelmsford and for some unknown reason started to walk home about 9 o'clock. Instead of going along the Tingsboro Road, she followed the railroad track toward Westford. At 12:30 o'clock, a brakeman found the child in an exhausted condition on the railroad track a quarter of a mile below Westford Depot. The child could not speak or walk when found and was on the verge of freezing. She was carried to the station and was cared for by Mrs. J.W. Fletcher, and when revived, told a disconnected story. The little girl did not have hat or mittens on, but was clothed in warm coat and gaiters. The father of the girl, Mr. Joseph Damaris, was notified and came for her late in the afternoon. It is thought that she will recover. Next is the Westford Center section. Schools closed the 16th for the midwinter holiday vacation for 2 weeks. The faithful RFD carriers will cover their routes on Monday and help circulate the Christmas letter to those living along their territory. Mrs. Edna and Jenny Ferguson, Edith A. Wright, Ruth Tuttle, Eva Pine, and Edith Bicknell are among our young ladies teaching in other places who are at home for the Christmas holidays. Last Sunday morning at the Congregational Church, Reverend David Wallace gave his hearers an excellent Forefathers' Day sermon. Next Sunday morning, there will be a special Christmas Day sermon with appropriate music. On Christmas Eve, Saturday, the Sunday school will have their special observance. There will be a supper for the children at 5:30, and at 6:30, the Christmas tree with Santa Claus and other entertainment. The snowstorm of Tuesday night has made good sleighing and the promise of a white Christmas. The men on our branch line electric have been hindered with the snow where it drifts, and particularly where old Boreas gets in its worst work on the Cummings Hill, but they have done valiant work to make their regular trips. Boreas was the Greek god of the cold north wind who brought winter, and Cummings Hill, the trolley tracks followed Cummings Road up that hill from Lowell Road to Depot Street. Carl Anderson, the oldest child of Mr. and Mrs. Oscar Anderson, is convalescing from an attack of pneumonia. Mr. and Mrs. Wiley M. Wright recently held an auction of household goods at their former home, things that they did not wish to transfer to their new home. There was a good attendance and ready buyers. Since then, Miss Ella Hildreth has purchased the real estate consisting of house, barn, and about 4 acres of land. This place was between land on both sides belonging to the Hildreth estate, and the venerable house had treasured associations connected with Miss Hildreth's father and grandfather. Next is another paragraph on Christmas exercises. Last week, Friday afternoon, the pupils of the William E. Frost School had their Christmas exercises previous to the close of school for the vacation. The 4 teachers, Miss Ruth Fisher, the principal, and Mrs. Grant, Burnham, and Crocker, combined efforts and made a most successful and enjoyable event for their children and their interested parents and friends who attended in good numbers. The affair was held in the town hall with a Christmas tree. Each pupil received candy, popcorn, and oranges and participated in an interchanging of other gifts. The ornaments on the prettily trimmed tree were all the handiwork of the children themselves. The next paragraph is entitled, Seriously Ill. One of those sudden and serious transitions from apparently the best of health to ominous sickness, especially to little children, came to Dr. and Mrs. Wells this week when their little daughter was taken seriously ill. On Monday, her first birthday anniversary, when a group of other little ones were bidden with their parents to help observe the day, she seemed to so wholesomely well that it was hard to associate the idea of sickness with her. But later in the week, she was taken very ill. Her father called a specialist in children's diseases from Boston to consult with him. An abscess in the ear with some internal trouble is the diagnosis. With treatment, the condition of the abscess has been somewhat relieved, and the child is more comfortable, and continued gain is earnestly hoped for. Next is the Grange section. At the last meeting of the Westford Grange, the master and secretary, Mr. and Mrs. Frank C. Wright, gave reports of the State Grange sessions from which they had just returned and where they represented this Grange as delegates. The entertainment for the evening was in charge of the ladies' degree staff and consisted of a shadowy party in charge of Mrs. Alonzo H. Sutherland. Among the subjects represented were Hiawatha and Minnehaha, Jack Horner, an Indian, Happy Hooligan, Jack Spratt and his wife, a housewife, and Mistress Mary. The next paragraph is about a birthday party. On Monday afternoon, little Miss Elizabeth Wells had a party in observance of the first anniversary of her birth. It was a most enjoyable affair, and the little lady met the event with her characteristic sunny serenity of normal, healthy babyhood, and as if such events were no unusual happenings. The group of invited babies, accompanied by their mothers and a few other friends, ranged in age from 6 weeks to 2 years, and were certainly a winsome group, which consisted of Roger Hildreth, Esther Fisher, Elizabeth and Helen Hildreth, Alice Haywood, Everett Benoit, Mildred O'Connor, and Elizabeth Wells. Miss Elizabeth was the recipient of various gifts. The older guests, Mrs. Wells Mrs. Wells served refreshments of chocolate and cake, also homemade candies. The rooms were very prettily decorated with Christmas greens. And there was one more item from Graniteville. Mrs. A.J. Charlton, who has been on the sick list for a couple of days, is convalescing slowly. And that's the news in Westford for the week ending December 24th, 1910. Thank you for listening, and thanks to Ryan Cousins of WestfordCAT for providing technical support. You can find transcriptions and productions from the Wardsman at our website at museum.westford.org, or visit the Historical Society's Facebook page for more Westford news from days gone by. This is Bob Oliphant, and I hope you will join us for next week's Westford Wardsman podcast. Thank you.